Hey everybody, welcome to an episode of Repeater. My name is Evan.
And I'm Pat.
And we got a little solo ep for you today. Although I guess technically it's a duet. I feel like anytime a podcast has like no guests, it's a solo ep, no matter how many co-hosts there are. So Pat, I don't need to exclude you. It's a solo ep. Maybe we should just call it a duet, if that makes more sense.
I like duet thematically for this podcast.
Yeah.
I feel like it, from musical terms, it really, really fits.
Yeah, I think that is part of it. So, okay, well, there it is. We are doing a duet today, but not... Is that also... God, really showing how out of touch I am. Is that also what it's called when you do a side-by-side video on TikTok? Is that a duet? Do you duet someone?
Sure. As somebody that exclusively uses TikTok for social media, I can guarantee that is called a duet.
All right, good. Great. So we figured that out. We are doing one long 30-minute TikTok duet today with Pat and I. And that's it. Pat, how you doing?
Doing okay. Happy that it's starting to get warm, that we got through that long, brutal winter. Normally I like winter, but, pandemic and everything, can't have people over, can't enjoy snowstorms. So it's nice that the sun's out. It's nice that it's starting to get warm. So I'm happy about that. How about you?
Yeah, good. Similarly feeling the break from winter. I think everyone is getting excited. You can kind of feel New York waking up, which is exciting and cool. And, also, I guess it's like this pandemic's not over, so it's a little bit scary, but but at least you can go outside and do stuff. I see in the background here, Pat, you have a new bicycle, and that's a cool outside thing to do. You've been riding?
A little bit, yeah. Like you said, New York is coming back, so it is terrifying to see people out at brunch. Because we're in that weird phase where you don't know if somebody has received their vaccination. Right. And I try not to assume things about people, but for the amount of people I've seen out at brunch, gonna guess no. Can't be everybody. But yeah, no, getting out on the bike has been nice. I'm looking forward to the day that I don't have to wear several face masks while I do it. That's where it gets rough. But
that is tough. Yeah. No, thank you. Breathing through actually trying to breathe and have cardio through two face masks maybe is even more brutal.
Yeah. Well, I'll have superhuman breath by the end of this.
That is very true. I think you're right that probably most of the people brunching are not fully vaxxed. I forget which state it was. I read something this week that was like the biggest uptick in recent cases is all people in their 20s and 30s. And because it's like that's the crowd that's just dying to get out there and meet up and hang out. But it's also the age group that is of adults that is the least vaccinated probably.
Yeah.
So, whoops.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on what you will do when you first get vaccinated, fully?
Dude, no. I don't think I'm going to do stuff that different, to be honest. I'll go hang out with my dad just got fully vaxxed yesterday.
Congrats.
Thanks. His partner is half vax. So I feel like, we'll just go visit. That's probably what'll happen. It's boring, but it'll be nice. Yeah, I think most stuff's not really going to pop off until the majority of folks are vaxxed.
Yeah.
Even if you yourself feel good, it's going to be small stuff still, I think.
Yeah. Well, but also getting to visit them, even if that's boring, that's huge.
Yeah, no, it's nice.
I know that I'm just excited to go to the grocery store and stress a little bit less.
Yeah. Not have all of the tension held in your shoulders like you have for the last year.
Exactly.
Yeah, I can get that. So this is a music podcast, folks. If you're tuning in for the first time, welcome. If you're coming back, thank you so much. Goddamn, you're an angel. We talk about songs that people love, and before we even like do that, sometimes we just talk about songs that we're listening to recently. Try to give you some new music tips. Pat, what have you been listening to recently, or what do you want to give a shout out to?
In typical me fashion, I cannot limit it to one.
Okay.
Just because I don't know, I feel like being inside all the time, I've just needed a lot to help cope.
Yeah. Can we do this, dude? Let's go. Can you go from most accessible to least accessible?
Sure. I mean, fair.
That's not a judgment. I just think that's like a fun way. That's just a fun way to like, let's ease people in. You know what I mean?
Right. Not judge at all. Knowing me and the things that I have come to this show with, totally fair. I will say this time we're not getting into like dungeon synth or anything like that.
Okay. No dungeon synth on the pod today.
No, I'm sorry to disappoint. We know that's our largest demographic of listeners.
That is our largest. Yes.
Yeah. All right. So fair enough. Most accessible. We'll go with a band that sings in English.
Great.
Nervous Dater put out a new record, I guess, maybe about a month ago.
Yes.
Called Call in the Mess. That's a really fun one. Indie rock, has some country vibes, which is pretty fun. That's the album that like really made me miss going to shows with friends. Their song Tinfoil Hat, I just imagined being up at the front of the crowd, arm in arm with friends, just sort of shouting the chorus. It's really fun. If you liked Hop Along or just, anything with like a cool, fun, peppy vibe, but like the lyrics are kind of sad when you listen to them, it's for you. The other thing I've been revisiting from a less accessible standpoint, because all the lyrics are in Portuguese, is an EP from Fernando Mota. And I'm sorry, guys, I love your band, but I'm going to struggle saying this name. Eliminadorzinho, which means little eliminator. It's an EP called Lapso. It's cool. It has kind of like fuzzy Japan Droids vibes. I think it's a lot of fun. If you're into like Midwestern emo, probably in your realm of listening. But yeah, kind of going back and forth between those two recently.
Yeah, those are very fun. I guess the thing I wanted to shout out, also maybe about a month ago, dropped Friends of the Pod Warriors dropped an EP of covers, which is very fun. Please check out like their regular work, because we're huge fans of that band. But it was sort of like it's fun. It's just fun to get a little bit of an EP of covers. And the song I'm going to shout out is Letter from an Occupant, which is a new Pornographers cover, and their version is great. I really enjoy it. It's a 5-song EP. There's some good stuff. There's a Rancid cover, which is great. I don't know. I really dig it. And it's cool too because Lauren's voice is very different than the original artist, the original singer, Nico Case's voice. So it's like a really cool contrast.
Yeah, that was a fun little surprise a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, that's exactly what it felt like. It felt like a treat in a year that has not necessarily like given us too many treats. We've gotten plenty of like good music, new music and stuff like that, but this just felt like a bit of candy or something like that, which was cool. But Pat, I'm gonna jump right into the song that I want to talk about today.
Yeah, go for it.
Because I am cheating. Part of why I love this Warriors EP is because I think it really like has made me revisit a lot of music I listened to in college. And so I wanted to talk about Letter from an Occupant by the New Pornographers.
Perfect.
Which is just a killer song. If anyone is not familiar with New Pornographers, big indie rock band. I think their first album, of which this song was on, Mass Romantic, I think it dropped in like 2000, so very of the aughts. They were a big like power pop indie rock group, and in some ways a bit of a indie Canadian supergroup to some extent. Nico Case kind of already had a career of her own, and she's the lead singer on a lot of tracks. You also have AC Newman, Carl Newman, who kind of also releases his own work. And I'm not like the biggest super fan and don't know everything about them, but I remember they were like hyped as far as indie bands go. And I didn't even find out about them probably until years later. You know, I was slow on the uptake with a lot of indie rock. But when I first heard this song, this was probably the first song I heard by them. And I don't want to be like hyperbolic. It didn't blow me away, but I was just like, oh, this is what I've been looking for, I think, with indie rock. Because I was way more into like bullshit pop punk and stuff like that at the time. And I wanted something that just felt urgent. And I think Nico like almost strains like every time she has to sing a chorus on this song. And I was like, oh yeah, that's what I'm looking for. I'm like looking for this power pop thing, but with just the smallest amount of an edge, you know?
Yeah.
And that really like sold it for me.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest, like I never really got into the new Pornographers. And that's not, I mean, truthfully, it's because when they were, what do you say, the first was 2000?
Yeah.
Like that was my snotty teenage years where I was like, oh, listen to punk and metal and blah, blah, blah. And for me, I think sort of my gateway into more of like the indie pop realm was like Broken Social Scene.
Mm-hmm.
And like that edge that you're talking about, sometimes it's like so like not even noticeable.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting when you hear it because it is sort of a I don't know, it felt like a doorway of like, oh, okay, there's something that feels real about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't, not to diminish any of the other artists, but there was something that just like the imperfections, I guess, was what made it interesting to me.
Well, and isn't Broken Social Scene is like another Canadian sort of indie supergroup, right? And I think Nico even like also sings for them sometimes, or has maybe on occasion. I'm not totally sure, but there's something about like these collaborative projects coming from like indie Canadian rock, I guess, that is special. I don't know. They seem to pull it off in a really nice way. I can't remember the last time I heard like a US supergroup that I was just like, oh, what a delicate balance of different elements.
Yeah. Well, and I'm going to say this from a very uninformed place, so sorry to our Canadian listeners.
Go for it.
But I feel like I've read or heard that the Canadian government does a better job at like sponsoring or like assisting the arts. And that may not be entirely true, but like
it has to. Do you think the US does any good job of it?
No, not at all.
Like pick a country. They probably do a better job. But yeah, so another thing I love about this song is that lyrically it's kind of insane. And I was trying to look this up before we recorded today. I couldn't find anything definitive on this, but I have this recollection years ago. I think it was an interview with Carl Newman, kind of like he's sort of like one of the lead guys behind the band. Mm-hmm. And someone was asking him what Letter from an Occupant is about, because I'm going to give you the chorus lyrics on this song. The chorus is just 2 lines, and it's, "For the love of God, you said, not a letter from an occupant." So on its own, what does that mean? But you assume that in context with the rest of the song, okay, this will make sense, right? Like, it would probably be the first hit indie song about a landlord. Like, that's the only thing I can think of, is that it's like a song from the landlord's point of view, and we're talking about, you know, somebody who's like renting an apartment in their building or something. But there's like nothing else in the song that seems in any way to that point. Like it's just, I think there's like some beautiful couplets, and the lines are really like thought-provoking in some ways, but it doesn't particularly make sense. It just sort of seems like stream of consciousness thoughts. And in this interview, I remember, I may be misremembering from years ago, Newman said something like he often writes lyrics just based on what the sounds will sound like. So he'll choose like the correct number of syllables and the kind of consonant or vowel sound that he wants to maybe, finish a line and things like that, or just to like go with whatever the music is. And that this was an example of that, like that it means nothing. It's just occupant was the right word to use for the space that he was trying to fill.
Yeah.
And I think that is both fascinating and like a very sort of, I don't know, craftsman way of thinking about music, like we just have to get the sounds to be correct. The lyrics aren't maybe as important. But it's also kind of insanely frustrating from the point of view, especially of, this was like nascent internet analysis era. So it's like a lot of you're just mostly just listening to music and trying to figure out what the lyrics mean. And you might catch like a magazine interview here and there, but it's not like they're just like, I don't know. It just wasn't as like, there weren't as many places to go and find out what something was about back then as there are now. Yeah. And it like low key drove me nuts for a while. Like, what is this song about?
Yeah.
But there is like the opening line is this gorgeous thought-provoking thing of, it's just I'm told the eventual downfall is just a bill from the restaurant. And I like that, to me, is like perfect low stakes humanity. Like
right.
The thing that will break us is just, an extra $10 or something like that. So yeah, I love the lyrics to this song, and also am resentful of them at the same time, I suppose. which I like.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it turns the lyrics into almost like another instrument in the song, where
exactly.
It's helping paint a picture, but kind of in a more abstract way, where maybe none of them were ever intended to mean anything. I don't know. That gets into like art criticism, right? Like, or art interpretation of, is it okay that maybe the lyrics are disjointed, but now you as the listener get to decide what you feel the song is like.
Right. Totally. And I think it's like, it is very much in that realm of art criticism. And it's, I don't know. I don't think the point of it is to like be nonsensical. I don't think that's their intention at all. I think it's just sort of like, oh, we'll write as much of a song as we can write, and then where we don't have anything brilliant to say, we're going to default to what sounds the best, Yeah. And so it almost just like keeps you guessing throughout. And at this point, like I said, I was trying to look this up and confirm this before we recorded, and I can't right now. I think I saw a Rolling Stone mention from Newman that just said he's still trying to figure out like what the song really means. But I think that's something that a lot of artists say, even if the song is like obviously about, I don't know, a failed relationship, let's say, you're still like really trying to come to terms with what it's about, whatever. But now it's like, at this point, I love that, 15 years later or whatever, I could have this romantic idea of what this song is, and I could still be wrong, and it could just be about like, someone's day. They could have just been like recording their day and wrote a song about it. And there's probably all these fans out there that know this band better than me that are like, duh, dude, you're an idiot. This song is very obvious about what it's about, but I'm gonna hang on to this like ambiguity.
Yeah, I mean, but that's also the fun part about it, right? Like, it could just be about somebody's day, but if taken at like a metaphor or like from the artistic standpoint, somebody's day might have a theme that applies to like a larger story. Right.
I think of this song too because Pat, as you were saying, it's like early 2000s, a lot of bullshit. Some of it that we have a wonderful and fond appreciation for, but like I was listening to angrier, angstier music, really when this album was out and being celebrated. And it wasn't until some years later that, like I would say the middle of college is probably when I found this, like sophomore, junior year. So probably around 2006, 2007. And I think I found it around the same time I found Rilo Kiley. And if anyone's unfamiliar with that band, that's like a similar kind of like power pop guitar, but like distortion, but with like good pop hooks, fronted by a woman. And I think that came to represent a lot of guitar music that I ended up liking for the next bunch of years. It was just like this pivot to being like, oh, you can be really earnest. You can have like the energy, maybe some of the energy borrowed from like punk music and pop punk music. But you can also kind of write slightly better songs and have a better perspective about the world. And I think ultimately like, that's what I was just waiting for. I was like, yes. It's like kind of the energy I like, but it's just not as gross, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah, this song also kind of just like represents a little bit of that turning point and opening up to some music, which like in retrospect is not at all far away from the music that I had been listening to, but was like, oh yeah, I could just be more okay with liking more types of bands or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was very cool for that as well.
I also got into Rilo Kiley, and I don't know if this ever happened to you, but like you were saying, at the time, it was harder to find out about bands, right? Like, you had their MySpace page, and sometimes they had pictures up, or sometimes they didn't have a MySpace. And so with Rilo Kiley, for the longest time, I thought that was a person. I thought that...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, same.
Because I knew of Nico Case, and so I was like, oh, well, Rilo Kiley is somebody else who's also very good.
Who also has like an interesting name.
Yeah.
You're like, yeah, sure, sounds like it could be a name.
Sounds like it could be a Canadian.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, dude. I mean, Rilo Kiley fucking ruled. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know what their legacy is going to be, and I don't care, frankly. Like, that's a band that in some ways could do no wrong in my eyes. Like, they put out 4 albums, something like 3 or 4 albums. It wasn't the broadest catalog, or it wasn't like the biggest catalog that a band has ever released, but just from start to finish, I don't know, I think they kicked ass. And I think, as with many bands, it will be debated if their last album was worth making, but I fucking loved their last album, so I have like no qualms about saying that they were great all the way through.
Nice.
Yeah. Pat, what did you want to talk about today?
Sure. So kind of like you, I've also been revisiting some college favorites.
Nice.
But this came about because Mogwai just released an album, which I did not write down the title of, so sorry, Mogwai.
We'll get it for you.
But it went to number 1, and it was their first album in 25 years to hit number 1. And I was like, yeah, good for you. Like, that rules. If you don't know much about Mogwai, they're, I guess, classified as post-rock. Very lyric minimal. And sometimes when there are lyrics, it's like heavily hidden behind vocoders or vocal effects. And actually, sort of this path that happened was Mogwai released that album. At the same time, Daft Punk announced that they broke up. And so I was thinking a lot about, like, what bands do I think of when I think of vocoders? Because I think of Daft Punk, Stevie Wonder, and Mogwai. Yeah. Which is a weird trio that's in my head, but I love it.
It's not like on every it's not on every playlist back to back to back.
And they shouldn't be. All equally good, but for very different reasons. But I've been digging through and kind of listening to old stuff that I hadn't listened to in a while. And then I saw on Spotify that they have an album of like live releases called Government Commissions and their BBC sessions. And I think I have not looked into this. I know that at least a handful of these are from like Peel sessions.
Okay.
So the song that I've been listening to probably the most, partially because it's the first track on this album, is Hunted by a Freak, which is off of Happy Music for Happy People.
And Happy Music for Happy People has a song Hunted. What is it? Hunted by a Freak.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a beautiful title for that album.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that you get from post-rock, and maybe a thing that, like, really attracted me to it was this, like you were saying about words that just have a sound. Because they're instrumental, because they don't really have lyrics, you get these songs that have these titles, and they're very illustrative. They tell a story where there's no words. And this song does have words, but they're heavily processed. So I don't know what you don't know what the story of this song is. But it's just a really pretty kind of running arpeggiated guitar line through the whole thing. And I don't know, there's something really comforting to that. And, I found them in college, and at the same time that post-rock was really blowing up. And it was just sort of this really interesting expanse. Like, I never really knew music could feel that big, and I really liked that idea.
Can you zoom out a little bit for folks? Like, what is post-rock? Every genre, this is a constant disclaimer on the show. Every genre is impossible to fully define, and we don't seek to do that. But what, just generally speaking, like, how would you classify or talk about post-rock?
I mean, everybody to some degree has heard it. It's the larger, more cinematic sounding. It's typically used in soundtracks. If you've seen Friday Night Lights, that soundtrack was done by Explosions in the Sky, another very famous post-rock band. 28 Days Later has a Godspeed You Black Emperor track in it. Mogwai, what movies have they done? They've done a bunch of movie soundtracks, but none that I've ever seen. They did one about Zidane. They did one about atomic energy. They have another one for this new show coming out called 000. But post-rock is just kind of like, if you took the spacey parts of Pink Floyd songs, like Echoes, and then just gave them more delay pedals and more fuzz pedals and more synthesizers, it's a bigger universe. It's like a very atmospheric, sometimes thunderous, sometimes really fragile, more orchestral. Maybe that's the right way to say it.
I think that kind of like nails it, because I think when we think of cinematic music, people obviously think of classically cinematic stuff, right? Like orchestras creating that sound. And then maybe even more recently, we think a lot of sort of like a man with 1,000 keyboards, like sitting in his dungeon, creating big, cinematic sounds. And post-rock is kind of in between that. It's a band. Usually it's like something that sort of resembles on its surface a rock band, but they are creating something like really big, cinematic, that fits into that world as well.
Yeah, and so something about this song that really interests me, like I said, it's a fairly simple melody, but I think it sets the stage for scale. It's a fragile song. Like the guitar tone is very delicate. But what always has interested me with post-rock is the fact that it's, usually, well, with the exception of Godspeed, it's usually just a handful of people. Godspeed, I think, is like, I don't know, maybe 12 people. But Mogwai, for example, is, I believe, at the time, a set of 5 folks who are able to create this like thunderous sound from very simple riffs and guitar lines, and that's always been really interesting to me. It's impressive.
And is there something like you talked about this like running arpeggio, right? And I guess for you, just personally, it's like, what is there a power for you into like with like repetition in songs, or just like that build of like basically a long build, either from small to large or large to small. I'm kind of like curious about how you think about that. Like, is that stuff you love to use in certain parts of your life, or is it kind of like always welcome, you know?
That's a really great question. Because I think something that turns people off to music like this sometimes is they see that this track is not all that long. There's a live version of their song called Like Herod that's like 18 minutes long. Mm-hmm. And I think that turns people off because that's a commitment, right?
Right.
But to me, I think I really like the patience of it. You know, you can respect the craft of a song that is a minute and a half, right? Or 3 minutes. Mm-hmm. That's solid and it's encapsulated. But sometimes it needs that distance or that duration to breathe and really to like soak in the idea. So for me, it can be like a very meditative thing. So I'll do it. I will listen to it to relax.
Sure.
I will listen to it to focus. Mm-hmm. I will listen to it to calm nerves or anxieties or whatever. And maybe we've talked about this before, but I think it's worth bringing up again. There's sort of this spectrum that I have with music, and it's how I sort of connect the dots between like the quietest things I listen to the most potentially, I don't know, even scary things, where I own like a ton of just ambient albums that are field recordings or just a looping brook or something like that. You know, there's craft in minimalism and really just pulling back on everything. And to me, the spectrum sort of starts there and then can go up to like piano music or violins and things like that. And then to get a little more oomph and energy and like, I don't know, vibes, you can get into like Explosions in the Sky. And then Mogwai, who have a little bit more grit, and Godspeed, who are a little scary. They get into more dissonance that feels a little more hopeful. And to me, it's kind of like you're turning up the distortion and the gain.
Yeah.
Because once you get now you can get into the threshold of like heavy metal.
Sure.
Where like you don't understand the lyrics, but at the same degree, you're getting repetition, you're getting drone, you're getting, and it's just like a difference in energy to me. So yeah, it's like that's where like instrumental sort of falls into like a meditative tool or something that I have in my back pocket for managing a day.
Yeah. If you were to try to like just a music fan who is open to it but has not, you know, ever listened to Mogwai, and you're gonna tell them to listen to this song, what do you think is like the optimal setting just for like your average person? You know, is this like, that's what I'm wondering, you know, how to pitch it to them.
I mean, headphones is like, this is a headphone band.
Like Twilight Walk headphones on your run, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just like trying to match the energy so people can really be like, I want to love this song and I want to have the patience. What should I be doing while I listen to this song?
Sure. Yeah. Morning coffee, Twilight Walk. I think as a running song, probably a good beat to run to.
That's good. That's helpful.
But I think from a more accessible standpoint, like, a walk or with your morning coffee or with a glass of wine. It's this, out of the whole spectrum of things I brought up today, this is a very accessible, and it's not gonna like get in your face and like challenge you. It's for me, this is a very comforting and relaxing song.
Yeah. Can you remind us of the title of the song and the album it can be found on?
Sure. This is Mogwai's Hunted by a Freak from the album Happy Music for Happy People.
Nice. So everyone should make sure to check that out. Also check out Mogwai's new album, which I believe is called As the Love Continues. Does that sound right, Pat?
It does.
Yeah. So that's their latest album, which is also worth checking out. It's huge. I mean, it's kind of crazy that after all these years, they just had a #1 album.
Yeah.
Right?
No,
Especially
absolutely.
for especially for the type of music they make. It's like totally nuts.
Yeah. No, I mean, and that's why it's great. I will say, just hearing the band, or rather the album name again, something that I find fun is to sort of look through their song titles just to see what things were called.
Yeah.
Because that's just kind of a fun thing. On that BBC Sessions, there's a song called Superheroes of BMX. And it doesn't sound like what you would expect it to sound like, but maybe it does.
Maybe it does. Yeah. It's all about the interpretation, you know?
Right.
So listen to Letter from an Occupant by the new Pornographers. Check out their debut album, which if you're like our age and haven't done, I guess this is your chance. This is your calling to finally revisit an album from 21 years ago. It's called Mass Romantic. And I don't know, if you like indie rock, you'll probably like it. That's the best recommendation I can give on that. And check out Warriors. Of course. Just because even for the cover of this song, you'll dig. Pat, anything else today before we let people go?
Yeah, on the subject of Warriors, check out Lauren's Substack. It's called Get It Together.
Yes.
They release it weekly. It's really cool. Music recommendations, creative recommendations, just a whole bunch of really awesome stuff. Highly recommend subscribing to that.
Hell yeah. Yeah. Definitely do that. And hey, subscribe to this podcast if you're not already, if this is your first time listening to it. And check us out on social media. We're on Twitter, Instagram, @Repeater Show. You can keep up to date with everything that's going on.
Sounds great. Please follow us. Tell everybody to follow us. As many people as you can think of.
Truly. Get the word out there. And until next time, everybody, hit repeat.
Repeater is hosted by Evan Ford Barden and Patrick Cartelli. Visit us online at repeater.show for live dates, hot music tips, and show archives. Theme music by the Sun Lions. Everything else by Love Nest Productions. Welcome to Repeater.
Yeah, well, I'll have superhuman breath by the end of this.